Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, and I want to welcome you to the show where we have some wit and wisdom to share with you and some wonderful experts to help women navigate career and life changes and challenges. And most importantly, to let you know that you are not alone. Each week, through our conversations, we share resources to encourage women to become more confident, resilient, and brave in their career and life choices. So we stream live weekly at every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on the E360 TV network, which you can find on your favorite streaming platforms like Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire. And we go live simultaneously on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, where you can interact with us. But if you prefer to listen on the go to your favorite shows, we're also on all the podcast channels. So if something inspires you as you listen today and you want more, please subscribe to your favorite channel. Leave us a comment, share your favorite episodes so we can create more ripples in the world for women. So today we're talking to women whose careers have taken many turns. I know mine has. It gives them broad and deep backgrounds that can be hard to narrow down into one path. I call these rainbow careers. And many of my clients are blessed with these rich experiences. My guest calls them zigzag careers. And no matter what you call them, it can be challenging to position yourself for your next career move. So let's get some help with that. My guest, Susan Hamilton Meier, will take us deep into the art of personal branding for mid-career women seeking to redefine their professional journeys. Susan brings her vast corporate experience working with Fortune 500 companies to develop their brand strategies and their messaging. And she comes to us with a passion for empowering women to navigate career transitions with confidence and clarity. Her approach combines her expertise in brand strategy with a profoundly personal understanding of the challenges and opportunities women face in transition. So, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're a career changer, or you're looking to level up, listen closely for some valuable guidance on branding yourself for success. So, let's get to it. Hello, Susan. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. I really want to just jump into it. Is that okay with you?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So let's talk about how people can think differently about their career paths.
Yeah, well, one of the words that you used was confidence. And when I work with my clients, so often they say that's the very first thing that they need. I mean, they're coming to me for advice on how to tell their story, how to introduce themselves, branding. But often where they're starting is going kind of, what right do I have to be in the room, I want to make a change, but how will other people see me when I'm coming from something different? I know I have the skills and the passion to do this new thing, but how can I make sense for other people, and also so that I really feel justified in doing it. So that's definitely the starting place.
All right, that's great. Hold on one second.
Mhm.
I'm figuring this out. There we go. All right, that's a great place to start. All right, now you call these zigzag careers when people are they have multiple areas of interest and expertise. So why is having a zigzag career so valuable in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I always say it's a feature, not a bug. And I think before I get into why it's valuable, I also want to just sort of address that myth that I think we often live under. Certainly, historically, I think it's gotten better, but historically, the kind of notion of what made a good career was kind of climbing a ladder, like the traditional corporate idea of, you start out on the low rung of the ladder and you work your way up and you get promoted, but you're sort of inside of a silo, right? You're inside of a function or inside of an industry. And I think we have still that hangover from that idea of what a career should be, that you're constantly making progress in a linear fashion. And the reality, as we see around us, which I think is very positive and healthy, is that that's no longer as constrictive and constraining and set in stone. Lots of people have side hustles. Lots of people, have startups and do new things. And that's, with remote work, I think that's also opened up a huge openness in people's minds about what work should be. However, I do think that, particularly like a lot of the women I work with are high achievers, right? And so they kind of want to do the right thing and make a lot of progress and, be leaders. And I think it's still very hard to internalize that it is, in fact, okay. And as you said, not just okay, but actually beneficial to do different things, move into different industry, take on a different functional role. And so some of the reasons I think that is beneficial, like I said, it's a feature, not a bug. First of all, more friends, right? You're moving, you're not staying in your little bubble. And, Lord knows social media has connected us with people, but actually it's also reinforced the bubbles that we're in. And so when you jump from one world to another, either, doing multiple things simultaneously or making a big change from one group of people, one industry to another, you're just meeting more people. So you're expanding your network, you're having more interesting conversations. That leads to the next benefit, which is more ideas, right? You're exposed to different things, different ways of thinking, different actual ideas, and also different ways of approaching ideas. And so you're much more likely to make connections between seemingly unrelated things, which is in fact the definition of creativity. So you're going to be more innovative, you're going to have more skills. And that's kind of the third area where I think it's really beneficial to do this kind of zigzag or rainbow career, that you're actually creating more value, right? Because you have these encounters with different people and different ideas and the ability to put them together in new ways. You have a broader skill set because you've done different things in different places. And so you're going to be a more creative, innovative, and kind of value-producing human.
I love that. I love that. Who doesn't want more of that, right? Who doesn't want to have more impact and bring more value? I think that in the corporate world today, and you're so right about how we used to think about careers. I know when I started out, that was my goal. That was just the way it was done. I had the opportunity, though, to move around different industries so that I got exposure to a whole different set of ways an organization ran, right? And that's hugely valuable when you're getting into the leadership ranks, knowing how the business runs at a more holistic level. I think that's hugely beneficial. I love what you just said about that. So, all right, I want to ask you about this because you and I think in the same way here. The questions, who are you and what do you want, right, are key to answering so that you can create a compelling branding position, right? So tell us how you approach that.
Yeah, and that is where I start. It's interesting because I developed this set of tools and exercises that I use with my clients for personal branding. And I developed them very directly off of the tools that I had developed for corporate clients. But with corporate clients, I start them with thinking about their audience, developing a sense of empathy, putting themselves in other people's shoes, because that's harder for a large organization to do. They're much more comfortable talking about their own capabilities and their exciting new products and their amazing team. when I'm working with individuals, it turns out that's actually what's harder for people. It's harder to sort of see their own value and speak their own value. So we start with that, and then we move on to kind of, okay, who's your audience? Who's it for? How are you serving them? Still important stuff, but we start with that foundational who are you question, which, it's a very easy question, but a very hard question. It's kind of an existential question. If it's
Right.
easy to overthink it as well. So, and by the way, those kind of existential personal questions are relevant in your professional sphere because, who are you? The answer right now in a professional sphere, maybe I'm an accountant, but undoubtedly there's more to you than your job description. And if you're thinking deeply about where you want to go, how to have clarity around that, how to have impact ultimately, you're going to need to dig a little deeper than, I'm a manager in a bank or I'm a, engineer. So we do start with who are you, not just from a professional perspective, but all of the bits and pieces, your personality, your style. What do other people reflect back to you when they give you compliments, personally and professionally? What are your favorite things? What are your superpowers? Those funny little random things we're good at that kind of for no reason, doesn't have any meaning or a purpose, but somehow they're linked back in the end to, you're great at parallel parking. Okay, let's talk about how that actually shows up in your career, because I bet you it does. And then we go deep on values. So, the Brene Brown work around values, kind of jumping off from that concept, we dig into, what are your core values? What do they mean to you? So defining terms, words mean different things to different people, really getting underneath like one word, like commitment or faith. What does that actually mean to you? How does it show up in your world? How does it show up in your work? And can you brainstorm ways that it could show up for you in the future? And later we come back around when we're developing a career roadmap forward to how can we use our values as guardrails, particularly for smart, curious people like the ones that I generally work with. One of the issues is too many options, too many interests. So creating kind of boundaries and guardrails that link back to who you are and what you really value and what really motivates you is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think when you are grounded in what really matters most to you and what you value, it also helps you make those decisions,
Yes.
right? So if there are lots of options to consider, which are the ones that now align with what matters most to you? And
Yes.
that can often help you just kind of we, sort the wheat from the chaff, right? And
Absolutely.
just get to the, well, this one aligns better with what I really care about today. And this other one, although I'm really good at it, doesn't allow me the freedom I want or the ability to hold my value of family first as well.
Yes.
So that I think is it's foundational, it's grounding work, and it really in the end will help you make choices that feel more aligned.
Exactly. I mean, the exercise in and of itself is fun, but and illuminating, but
Mhm.
ultimately we're doing it because we want to make informed choices,
That's
right? Our
right.
time is our most valuable resource. How are we going to use our time? And I think another thing that comes up when we start applying it, which in the end of the way I do the process is at the end of the process, we go back and apply those things as guardrails to those kind of decision making, creating a decision making framework. And one thing that often comes up is this differential between shoulds and wants.
Mm,
Right. So we have these deeply, a lot of us have these deeply ingrained kind of, I should do this next, or I should not do that because X, Y, and Z. And when you then compare that to like actually what I really, really care about, what I really, really want, what I'm really good at and gives me joy is pointing me in this direction. And I have this kind of monkey in my ear saying, you
Yeah.
shouldn't do that. That's a useful conversation. Just to be aware of that gap is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And then work out some of those trade-offs and, how to narrow that gap.
I think one of the ways to help you figure out how to kind of mitigate the shoulds is to figure out where they come from. Are they really your beliefs that you should do this, or are you listening to someone else, right? And maybe from years ago, right? Who instilled a belief in you that you should be on this path or that path, or
Right.
do this and not that. And those may not be beliefs that serve you well now.
Yes.
So digging under those and understanding where do they come from, and do you still believe them for where you are now, and what do you want to believe instead?
Yeah, I think for me, I think of it as the shoulds are by definition external. There are also musts, right? Like we might
Mhm.
have a very clear set of desires and goals, but we must earn a certain amount of money. That's not necessarily extra. That's like sort of practical life reality. Or I
Mhm.
must continue living in the same city where I am versus moving somewhere else because my spouse has a job here. Or, there are certain things that are constraints that are
Yeah,
not externally imposed, but those shoulds are often like belief systems, as you said, that
right,
come from somewhere else and no
right.
longer serve.
And those constraints can be temporary too. They don't necessarily mean that because you must today that you always will
Absolutely.
have to do that. Then that the decision you make today based on what matters now and what you must do won't be your last decision.
Absolutely. And that's one of the tools in the framework that I use a methodology for kind of breaking down those barriers when we run up against, I can't do this because I use a framework that I used to use in corporate innovation work because it's very similar if you're kind of trying to move forward in your life. It's very
Yeah,
similar to a company trying to launch new products and innovate against what they've done in the past. In my experience, they're always coming up again. The reason it's so hard is they're coming up against, well, we can't do that because it's too expensive, or it'll take too long to get to market, or we don't have permission to go, our brand doesn't have permission to go in that direction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so in some organizations, they really have trouble innovating. And so there's this methodology that really is very useful in that context that take each idea. First of all, don't censor your ideas.
mm,
A lot of teams and individuals start by saying, well, I'm not even going to put that in the consideration set because there's no way that could ever happen. So
right,
first, don't do that. Include all the crazy ideas. Then there's a kind of prioritization framework. What's actually going to move the needle for you in terms of personal and external impact? What's hard versus easy? Then we go into, okay, for the stuff that's like really important to you and kind of hard, because the easy stuff you should just do if it's really important to you. Let's talk about why it's hard. Let's come up with, actually give voice to what those barriers are, examine where they come from, think about ways that they could change now or in the future, to your point. And it's amazing, amazing what comes up in those conversations where those barriers break down. People
right,
find a workaround.
right. And when you help people find other ways to explore possibilities, then the whole world opens up, right? It's if the aperture opens and they go, "Well, I never thought of it that way."
Yeah.
And that's it's so empowering for people to realize that they have many more options than they thought they had. They just have to think about it differently. They have to change the way this always I always come back to this fabulous quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that's just that's perspective. It's just
Yes.
opening the aperture a bit so that you get to see things from a different point of view.
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to joke that I should start calling my course Manifest Your Beach House, because the number of people that came through the process looking for and getting personal branding, professional, positioning. But in that exercise, I asked them to like put all the things they want, not just the professional ones in there.
Right.
And, of course, a lot of us, one of those things that we want is, oh, it'd be so great to have like a, cottage or a ski house or, whatever it is. And sure enough, they come through with these great innovative ideas for, I could share it with somebody. I could, take a little piece of this. It's amazing. And the number of people who've come back to me later and said, like, guess what? I have a ski house now.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
cool.
What a great idea. I think you should change your I think you should change the name of your program. I think that's great. Okay, so let's talk about how important it is for us to have a community around us to provide us with valuable feedback that helps us chart where we're headed.
Yes. And that is actually the second thing so I check in with my folks regularly, and I ask them kind of, why did you come to me? And what did you get out of working with me? And it's confidence, clarity, and community. And the community is so important because, it's sort of a life truth about everything. You can't do it alone. You can't go through life alone. Right? Like, it's just impossible. And doing this particular type of work, I'll tell you, this is what I do for a living and I help other people with. I also run a business, so I also have to, do my own branding. I can't do it by myself. I tried, I can do the exercises, right? But it's very, very difficult. There's an old expression, you can't read the label from inside the jar. It's very hard to see clearly who you are and what your unique value is. You have to ask. First thing to do is just ask for feedback, right? Get testimonials, ask your friends, give me 3 adjectives to describe me. Just simple stuff can start to really open up a world of community and input, which leads to clarity. And then the other part of it is like going through the process with somebody. It could be a friend. It doesn't have to be somebody that you pay. It could be a branding expert like me. It could be a designer, right? Like if you're doing your website, hire somebody who like you have a good relationship with and who can really talk things through with you and not just kind of do the programming. But bouncing ideas off of another person, or even better, a group of people. I've been a member of a number of different women's networks over the years. And, in the beginning you think, oh, well, I'm not sure what we're going to do. We're just going to get together on Zoom for an hour a week. And they've inevitably been extremely useful because you hear other people's stories. It sparks something in you. It raises your confidence. You feel connected. They give you ideas. So community is extremely, extremely powerful in all of those different forms.
Yeah. And I think most importantly, I say it every time in my opening, it's so we know we're not alone,
Yes.
right? That there are other people who are experiencing what we're experiencing, or they have already experienced it and they're beyond it, and they become role models for us. They become advocates for us, cheerleaders, shoulders to cry on. That's so important. This is it's not a lone wolf kind of thing.
We're
Yeah.
social creatures,
Yeah,
humans.
we are.
We
We
are
are.
not built to kind of do
Yeah.
things alone.
And I call this, when you assemble these people around you, and you do it intentionally, because it's based on where you're going, what you need, and that changes, right? As you evolve, it changes. I call that our personal board of directors,
Like,
because if we are the CEO of our lives, and I believe we are, if we step into that role, then every great CEO is surrounded by a board of directors who are experts in areas where they're not, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
they,
I call that the tribe. I have a friend who calls it her council of persons. Whatever you
yeah,
call it, I'm
whatever
talking
you
about
call it.
exactly the same
Yeah,
thing you are. Cheerleaders, collaborators, mentors, helpers, peers, potential customers, all of them are in your tribe.
all of them. Yeah.
And I think it's important also to think about that last one, because I think that especially if you're starting a new business, it can be hard. It can feel awkward to sell something to someone.
Mm,
It can feel like you're asking them to give you their money, which feels negative. But turn that around, right? Like you're offering them something. If they don't find
right.
it valuable, they don't pay you. They don't take it, right? But
Right.
you're putting an offering out into the world. They're part of your tribe. Not everybody's going to buy from you. They're not part of your tribe.
Right.
The people who
Right.
are, and it should be a friendship that you're building. I always talk about, people ask me a lot of times when I'm talking about branding, what is a brand? What's the definition of a brand? How is it different from, just like the logo or the name? The brand is the relationship. The brand
Mm,
is that friendship, that community that you're creating. And that could be with somebody who's paying you for something, or somebody who's advising you on something, or somebody you're helping with something.
right.
Probably all of the above.
And it's how you show up in all of those relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the brand. Yeah. That's so important. And I want to talk for a second about positioning our brand. Let's talk about that for a second. What does that mean to you, and how do you explain that to your clients?
Yeah. So that is my core offering. I will say that when I first heard the word positioning, when I first started doing branding, it felt very negative to me, like somehow trying to pull the wool over someone's eyes,
Mm,
and smoke and mirror or something. So I'm not sure that I've come to like the word any better over time, but I can explain what it really is, because it's not that. Um, it's about finding and staking your position, your ground in a world of options, both for yourself of who you could choose to be and what you could choose to do, and for the others who are going to be part of that tribe, who they could choose to interact with or buy from or work with. What little stake of ground, what position do you choose and seek and hold? And that position is unique. And your challenge is to explain to other people how it's unique, but it's unique. Only you can do it. Only you can be there. And it's also kind of protected because only you can do it. But explaining how that's the case in a way that's kind of relevant and clear is the work of brand positioning.
And I think if I can add to that, it's also, you alluded to this, it's how you kind of connect the dots for someone else who has a role for you to play, for instance, and you are aligned with that role, and maybe especially in a zigzag career, right? You maybe haven't performed that role exactly, but you have all the piece parts. You have what it takes. And you need to be able to connect the dots and position yourself powerfully so someone else can see
Yes.
that this is a hand in glove fit. This actually, it may not look that way, but it actually does fit.
Yes. And in that context, I think one of the big success factors in positioning yourself well is selectivity, is
Mhm.
narrowing down. First of all, you can't tell your whole life story or even your
Yeah.
whole professional life story. You don't want to tell your whole life story, but figuring out, as in the example you gave, how can I tell my story in a way that makes it clear? I know that I'm qualified. I know that I'll enjoy that and be good at it. How do I make it clear to them? It's selecting the pieces of your story that you're going to tell, the way in which you're going to tell that story, connecting the dots, as you said, among those things that you've done or the pieces of the story that you're telling in a way that makes it clear to them, as it is to you, that this is a good fit.
Absolutely.
And that's what's hard to do by yourself, right? Like being able to kind of take, because you're too close to your own whole life story. It's
right.
very hard to say, that's what's interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
that's relevant.
And, that's one of the most rewarding parts of what I do, working with my clients, is helping them figure that out. So how do you position yourself for something that you want to sink your teeth into? How do you let other people know that you are the unicorn candidate for that you are the perfect fit?
Oh, I
Yeah,
couldn't agree more. It is
that's
such a
so rewarding.
rewarding aha moment when
Yes.
they're telling you, okay, here's all my stuff and what do you make of it? And you see suddenly so clearly, like, that's your story. That's
Yeah.
what's special.
Yeah.
Or those three things make
Yeah.
sense together, right?
Yeah. And that, you're right about the aha moments, because they're, like you said, they're too close to it. I love the analogy you had. You can't read the label from inside the jar. You're inside the jar. You are it, right? You can't, and it's really hard to express. A lot of people aren't comfortable talking about themselves that way.
Yeah.
So it takes someone else to help them see how special they are, and be able to put the language around it, right? That
Yeah.
makes them, that fits for them, that they can use themselves, and that authentically, and that it all feels very comfortable, and they can confidently lean into that and present themselves, in a way that other people believe them.
Exactly. And because of all those things you just said, it's a multi-step process
Yes.
from identifying those ahas. Okay, these are the bits of your story. I then take them through, like, okay, here's like an artificially awkward fill in the blanks exercise just to get the story pieces together on paper. Not like you would really say it this way, but let's just get it down, like
Yep.
almost like a concept for testing, right? And then there's a couple more rounds of edits in which, how does that feel in your own voice? What could you say different? What do you have to say differently for it to feel not so awkward?
Yeah.
How does it play when you're speaking it versus writing it? How does it play, in a very short profile versus a longer bio? And, really massaging it until it feels, like you said, authentic and natural, because it has to ultimately come from them. Like, they need outside help
Yeah.
to write it, but it has to be yours, right? To speak it and live it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It has to fit like a glove, really, so that they can just authentically present themselves, so that they know who they are. And this goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, right? Being really grounded in who you are, what you value most, and what you want. And then putting all those piece parts together of your story so you can convey that.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It's a multi-step process. So let's talk about, in this environment that we're in, um, the corporate environment, in many cases, certainly the job market. Um, there's a lot of competition, right? There's a lot of competition for uh, repositioning ourselves, up leveling ourselves, um, going after, open positions. There are hundreds of candidates who are applying for the same thing. Let's talk about beating the competition, right? And why that's not maybe the most helpful focus for our career strategy.
Yeah. Well, talk about the fastest way to run in the other direction from building confidence.
Right,
Right?
right.
It's, if it's hard to read the label from inside the jar, it's even harder if you're looking around at the other jars. Um, I often tell the story about when I was younger, I was a competitive swimmer. And when you're really little starting out, the most natural thing in the world to do is, you're taking a breath. And when you take a breath, you want to kind of look over at the guy in the next lane and see, like, are they behind you? Or are they in front of you? And that's the first thing they teach you not to do. Because why? Because it slows you down, right? Because your head is above what? You want your head in the water. You want to be going forward in your lane, in the right direction, not looking around at other people. You'll find out at the end soon enough whether you were faster or slower, and there's not much you can do about it. Certainly not anything positive you can do about it by looking in the next lane over. And I think that this is such an apt analogy for what we are tempted to do in everything we're doing in our lives. Like, oh, does my friend have a bigger house? Does my is that person that person got promoted before I did, and why? Who else is applying for this job? Oh my gosh, look at the stuff they've done. Maybe my stuff isn't as good. It is just not helpful, right? You also don't know what's in the mind of the person who is hiring you or purchasing from you. You have no way of knowing that. All you can be, and you also have no way of changing. You are you. Be the best version of yourself, yes, but you can't be somebody else. So focus on your own self, focus on telling your story as it is in the best way possible. Focus on moving that story forward and outward, and up leveling ever better version of you and who you want to be. But looking around at the competition is not helpful. In fact, the whole notion of strategy, competitive advantage, the stuff that gets used from like a corporate perspective, which, it has a place. Of course, you want to understand the competitive landscape and the context in which you're operating. And I guess there's a relevant analogy for that as for us as individuals, certainly as a small business owner, understand who else is out there making granola bars if you're making granola bars. So you understand a more relevant way of talking about why you're so different. But the notion of strategy was actually invented in wartime. It's not even from business. It was borrowed by business. It's military strat. The word strategy comes from the military. It's about, killing your enemy. Is that how we want to live? Right? Like that doesn't feel very good. And in fact, is often counterproductive. So collaborative thinking versus competitive thinking is, I find, much more fruitful for people.
Yeah, I think that's so right. You started by saying it's one of the biggest confidence killers. The other thing that I think it does is it blows up self-doubt, so that because we never feel smart enough, good enough, as accomplished. I don't have as many degrees. I don't have as many certifications. Whatever. You're so right. If we just focus on who we are and the value we bring and the impact we can have in our own lane, right, in our own way, that's unique. And that's what we need to focus on, so that the competition really doesn't matter. The right thing, when you know what it is you're looking for, that right thing is going to show up.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the competition mindset can lead you astray.
Sure.
If you're, for example, if you're looking at someone in particular that you are competing with and they go off in a certain direction and you're following them because you want to kind of compete, that might not be the right direction for you.
Right. Right. And quite honestly, that happens a lot for small business owners, right?
Yes.
They see what other small business owners in the same niche are doing, and they think that's the right way to do it. I need to do it that way. And then you get into it and you realize that just doesn't feel good to me. Doesn't feel right. And now you're backtracking. Now you have to come back to where, you are at ground zero and with some learning, right? And now you need to figure out what the right direction is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Competition is, collaboration is so much more fun. So much more
I
fun.
want to say, because we're talking about all these different mistakes that people can make, I also want to say I've probably myself made almost all of the mistakes that we're talking about, and it's also okay, right? Like if you're listening to this and going like, "Oh my God, I've done everything wrong," that's also a learning experience. Like you were
Right.
just saying, what made me think of it is you said, and you're back to ground zero and with some learning. But the with some learning part is important.
Very important.
So, none of the mistakes are without benefit. We're all going to make mistakes and have pitfalls. The more you can learn without making mistakes, better, but you're also learning from those mistakes.
Yep. So true. And I think sometimes our failures are our biggest teachers. When we take the time, right, to really look at them differently and glean from them what worked well, do more of that, and what didn't work so well, and do less of that, and see what can we do differently instead.
Exactly.
Yes. So yeah. Okay. So what are some of the tools, Susan, that can help us kind of make sense of our paths? All of these, we're talking about this eclectic career kind of situation, and how can we make better decisions in the future?
Yeah, well, we've talked about a few of them already, the ones that are more self-focused, and personal reflection, and really not skipping over that step. Because I also just want to say about that, I have experienced myself, and I've heard a lot of the women I speak to, or I work with, say that this is something women in particular tend to skip over more, in this kind of spirit of I'm here, I'm helping everyone else, and oh wait, I don't need to take the time to think about what I need. So don't skip that step is the first thing. But the other pieces, the other tools, which we haven't talked about in depth yet, are thinking about your audience, your tribe, whatever you want to call it, if it's your customers or your potential employers. Really getting into their shoes, their mindset, coming at it with a mindset of empathy, not just for kind of the functional, what do they need from you? What can you provide? What problem can you solve for them? That's important to know. But also taking the time to get to know them as human beings. What do they really aspire to? What's the actual payoff that they're getting out of working with you? Because understanding that is going to create a much deeper relationship and a much higher likelihood of a successful connection. If you can understand, it's not just that they, need an accountant or a granola bar, but they actually are looking for something much higher, like, to feel like a good person, to feel like a good husband, to feel like a good mom, like these much higher order things are always behind those seemingly simple decisions that we're making about which person to hire, which brand to buy.
Yeah, and again, it gets down to how we build relationships and getting to know people at their core, what's really important to them. So
Yeah.
we've done a lot of the inner work for ourselves to understand what matters most to us and who are we. But when you're in any relationship, the richness of it comes when we get to know who they are and what matters to them, right?
Yes.
And what's driving them, right?
Yes.
What's underlying what they say they need, the whys.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, the whys.
And then, the next step in the set of tools is how do you overlay those two things?
Hmm.
Right? Just as in any relationship, you're not going to have a perfect, matchup of I want this and you want that, or I need this and you give that. But where is the overlap? And how can you, as you were saying before, how can you connect the dots so that the other person can see? If you see it and feel it, how can you express that to them, communicate
Right.
that to them?
Yeah. Because when you get somebody else to believe like you believe,
Mm,
magic can happen.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Susan, we could talk about this for probably all day, but we can't. We need to put a bow on this. So I would love to ask you to just wrap it up for us. Give us some key takeaways that our audience can walk away with and maybe implement easily today. What are some of those?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we touched on a few big ones. One is don't go it alone. You are not in this alone, in this life, in this world, in this job search, or whatever stage of life you're in. And so don't be afraid to ask for help. I talk about that a lot with people asking for feedback, but more broadly, asking for help. People like to help. People want to help you. And so do not be afraid to do that. It is not a sign of weakness. It is not a sign of, aloneness. So that I think is one big takeaway, that I'd like to share, and also that I've, kind of gained from working people through this process. The other is, don't skip over that part about knowing yourself and valuing your own values, valuing that voice that says this doesn't feel right, or that this voice that says I really want this, in favor of those other many voices that are the shoulds and the musts. Because ultimately you're not going to feel grounded, and you're not going to do as good of a job at whatever you're doing if you're not aligned with who you really are, what you really want, and what your kind of motivating values are. And then build your team. I think that's the third one, right? Build your tribe, your council, your board of directors, and think about it in that way. I think the analogy you used of the CEO with the board of directors is like, yeah, you're the CEO of your life. I love that. And I mean, that feels very empowering to think about it that way. And I think it is truth. And you would never find a CEO running an organization by themselves. You have to, or with just like a random group of people working for them. Choose your people wisely, figure out who's in, and just as importantly, figure out who's not in your tribe. It's okay. You don't have to be friends with everybody. You don't have to bring everybody on board in your professional or your personal life. But think about, going back to your values and who you are, what are the guardrails for who you want to be on that team? And then cultivate those relationships, really invest in that.
Such wonderful points. Such wonderful points. And the one you ended up with is like number one as far as I'm concerned. And if you start with that, surrounding yourself with people you trust, who will tell you the truth, and that support you in whatever it is you're trying to do, then so much of the rest of this process can be made easier by engaging the people you have around you.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe start there. Yeah, love that.
Good idea.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights here. And I know that there are going to be people who are watching or listening, and they're going to want to get in touch with you. What's the one best way for them to do that?
Sure. My website is Susan Meier Studio. Susan Meier is spelled Meier. It's a little bit of a funny spelling, but and there's all my contact information, and you can see my social media and also learn a little bit more about kind of how I work. But you can email me through there as well.
That's fabulous. Thank you again. I really appreciate your being here and sharing all of your brilliance.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. Really enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
I'm glad you did. And thank you for those who are watching and listening. I appreciate that you're a part of this community. So if you enjoyed this episode, as I said before, please subscribe, leave a comment, click a star. Let us know what you think. Because creating and sharing resources for women is one of my favorite things to do. And another favorite thing is being a life coach, a career coach, and a life coach for women navigating challenging times and helping them get unstuck, explore new possibilities, and find harmony in their careers and lives. So if something in this episode resonates with you, if you'd like a fresh perspective, reach out. Let's talk. All of the links to connect with Susan and I are in the show notes below. And then let's meet again next time here, Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, for another inspiring conversation. Because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.